playing like penny poker over that winter. And she killed him and cut him up and buried him on the side of this cabin, right? There's all these cabins there, It's like you see, they have them everywhere, And a couple months go by. She goes off to work somewhere, and there's this family staying there, and they just it smelled kind of funny over there, and kids started digging around, and they found his arms and legs, and then his torso and another one. There were like flowers planted over it, but she only buried him 2 feet into the ground. Yeah.
Wow, that was number one mistake. But again, she was probably, when she killed him, probably figured, now what am I going to do with the body? How do you get rid of it? That's as bad as there was a case in Texas where a guy, because his wife was cheating on him, he killed her. And he didn't do it the conventional way. He had a backhoe or whatever it was, and in front of his property, he kind of lived in a rural area, so he dug a hole in it and waited for his wife to come home. And then he shoved her and her Mustang into this hole and then covered it with dirt. And then he lived in the house for another 5 years, and then he sold it. Well, the person he sold it to decided they were going to do some major landscaping, and they started digging up the yard to do whatever they did.
Yeah.
And here they found the car, and then they found the body.
Yeah, there was something like that happened I think it was in Ohio, outside of Cleveland, where in the 60s, mom left, and everybody just kind of accepted it. And the guy ended up selling the house like in the 90s and ended up, dying of old age. New people come in, they start, tearing down things in the house, and they find her body. I think it was in the basement, like under some cement or something like that. Or she was in a wall. It was one of those weird ones, though. There was a woman here outside of Sacramento, in the mountains again. I don't think those mountains do strange things, but she killed 2 different husbands 20 years apart the same way. She shot him with a shotgun while he was reading the paper and said it accidentally went off. But she's in prison
twice. And it sounds like she probably got away with it the first time, didn't she?
She did. She got away with the first one, not the second one.
Yeah, I mean, it's coincidental. I mean, how many people could be reading a newspaper and the shotgun goes off?
Yeah, and she used the same gun.
Was it for insurance?
The same gun
money?
that she used in the first murder.
Was it for insurance, or was it just after 28 years she was tired of the guy?
Yeah, she got sick of him.
Boy, she didn't think about divorce.
Yeah, she thought because she did it before, she'd get away with it again. So now you've always heard these stories about. It's like the boogeyman story. A little boy goes into the bathroom by himself. He's with his mom shopping or something, like at a mall. He goes into the bathroom to go, and ends up like getting killed or having his penis cut off or something like that, right? I've heard that story everywhere I've ever lived. I heard it in Michigan growing up. That happened in Kalamazoo. In Seattle, it happened in like Bellevue or something. I heard this everywhere. Even when I lived in Holland, I lived in the Netherlands for a couple of years, and that story came around. But I found out, I traced it down to this one incident in 1956, and it happened in Sacramento. This is out of my book, Forgotten Sacramento Murders, 1940 to 1976. And so there were these 3 brothers. They went to the matinee downtown theater, and his parents went and got something to eat, have a little time to themselves and stuff. And the little kid, Ronald Johnson, went to the bathroom. He was 8 years old. And went to the bathroom. His brothers didn't have to go. And this creepy guy named Thomas Johnston, who was an apprentice embalmer. That's why he was in Sacramento. He was like from Montana or something. He followed him into the bathroom and and tried to like cut him with a penknife, and ended up like slitting his throat and cutting him across his eyes, just like slashed him up. The kid was screaming, and the manager ran in, grabbed a billy club that he had. They called the cops, and they held him. And his father came from Montana for the trial and stuff, and said, you know, he's dumb as a rock. He's a twin. His sister's smart as heck. She's in college. This guy couldn't even make it in the Navy. And he got executed in San Quentin.
Oh, wow. Now, how long have you lived in California?
18 years.
So, I mean, I would think, wasn't there a lot of like mob murders and stuff, especially, you know, in the 60s, 70s in California?
Not really. The mob never really controlled California that much. It's because the police and politicians were the organized crime.
Well, what are some of the famous murders it took place later, like between like the 60s and 70s?
In California?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there's all those serial killers and stuff. I'm not a serial killer guy. I find that they've been written about too much already, and there's nothing left to write about on them. I'm a historian by training and stuff. I got a BA at Sac State here in Sacramento, which is a really good history school, and I go for the stories that nobody else is writing about. You know, the serial killers. You know, there's a lot of writers out there, and like the Golden State Killer thing. I live in the neighborhood right where it happened, and everyone here in Sacramento all thought it was like a special forces guy from one of the air bases here, but. You know, so we were hyperly aware of this Golden State Killer. We didn't call him that. We called him the East Side Rapist. And so now, you know, he's captured and all that stuff. And I don't know how many people are writing books about it, you know. And it's like, how much can you write about somebody hasn't even had his trial yet? You know, as a writer, I like to know what the beginning is or the ending is before I start writing about it, you know. That's what research is for. The story hasn't ended yet, so you know there's a lot of writers out there that I call ambulance chasers. You know, I dig up crimes, and I encourage other writers to write about what I dug up because I write just short stories about them, probably never more than 12 pages or so. I like just to get down to the facts. I put addresses, dates. Everything I can to just pinpoint everything. And if another writer wants to write about something that I discovered, I'm really happy about it. That's great. But I could never just be one of those ambulance chasers that writes about the latest serial killer or weirdo.
Well, how about in the 60s with, you know, LSD and all that type of stuff going on, like around San Francisco, Sacramento, Santa Barbara, and all that stuff. What any famous murders around that time frame around there?
Well, yeah, that's when all those serial guys, the Gallegos, and the Zodiac was busy, and Kempler, and you know all those freaks. But that's not my forte. You know, it's already been written about. So, you know, Sacramento's semi-embarrassed that we have, you know, 4 5 really infamous serial murderers come from our city, but that's mostly because of geography.
Oh yeah,
Sacramento. That's where the railroad started and ended, right? The Transcontinental Railroad. Sacramento was the end of the line, and so it's always been a transportation hub. It's never been like a small town. It started out as a city, and it's like a center of transportation. We got I-5, 80, Highway 99, Highway 50, Highway 40, all joined right in Sacramento. So, you know, you can get out of town quick. You can
run
disappear
down,
fast.
You can run into Nevada real fast, Reno too.
Right. 2 hours. A lot of crimes end up that way. They just threw bodies out there. Oddly enough, people think about California having a lot of crime. We really, compared to other places, we really don't have it. It's just that we have the population, and we have the area is so large. It's the third largest state in the lower 48. So, of course, there's going to be more news coming out. But if you averaged it out, we'd have less murders.
Yeah. What was the biggest crime years? Do you know? Like, was it in the 20s or 40s or 60s or 70s, or murders and stuff?
In America?
Yes.
Well, I would say 1926, because at the same time when I wrote all these things, there were all the gangster murders were happening in Chicago and Cleveland, St. Louis. All those cities were having gangster wars because of Prohibition. They were fighting over their turf. So I didn't even touch that area. If I would have touched that area, I would have had it would have been the size of an old phone book, and probably just as readable. So, crazy things happened too in 1926, like on the coast, New York, on Lake Ontario. The tide. There's a certain word for it too. It happens on the Great Lakes, where it pulls you back away from the shore, and it's like something. Anyways, it killed like 18 people just in like one people. These people were at a beach in the middle of summer swimming, and all of a sudden they all got just like pulled out into like miles away, and they all drowned. Like 16 people drowned. A lot of them were high school kids.
Interesting.
And that was like page 3 in news. In my Forgotten Sacramento crime book, there's a story about a police officer. He was off duty, hanging out in a bar. His wife was the bartender, and it was like a Tuesday night. 3 people in there, and this guy came in and robbed him. He ended up shooting the guy, and he got killed too. But that was like page 4 news the next day in our local paper. Nowadays a cop gets shot in Arkansas, and it's like all over headline news and stuff.
Oh yeah, the front page.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we need to go for break, and then we'll be back with David for another half an hour on Night Dreams Talk Radio. Mm-hmm. And everybody stay tuned. It's going to get hopefully a lot more exciting here on murders. I'm not into murders, but some of them are crazy how they committed these type of murders and thought they could get away with it. Anyway, we'll be back with the news, so stay tuned.
Was a biker, and he drove his motorcycle that fast. He drove a big chop hog with a gang colors jacket, and he ran down citizens for laughs. He had an old lady named Petula, packed an automatic 45 gun. They had just come up from California, where they shot 6 cops for fun.
Jake thought it was the best there was down the interstate he'd roar, till the day he tangled with the county sheriff. They all called 104, 104.
It was late on a Thursday evening, and Jake, he was feeling kinda mean, cause he'd just run out of his favorite drug, the one called amphetamine. So he sauntered up to Petula, and he said, say baby, let's split. There's a little gas station on down the road that might be fun to hit. So they drove up to the station, and they both jumped off and takes a ride. They were up to derision at Jake's decision as they both sauntered inside. The attendant, he was an old man, and he didn't think it very funny. When Petula died, that great big gunner said,
honey, give me all your money.
where the old man opened up the cash drawer and Jake grabbed the money and ran.